Today I'm speaking with Linda. Linda is a women's coach supporting high achieving, career oriented women in relaxing into their radiance and femininity in a way that inspires the world's service. Hi, Linda. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. I really appreciate it.
Mhm. Hi, Lupi. Glad to be here. Mm,
Yeah. So I want to share the intentions I'm bringing to this conversation and just speak them aloud. Um, yeah, it feels like for me a good way to start here.
mm,
So I intend to be present here with you to get to know you across all sorts of areas of your life, interests, things alive in your mind and experience and being in your entire life. And to do so with curiosity, being focused on everything you're sharing with me, of being relaxed, attentive, and really just enjoying uh, the magic of getting to talk with someone across the world about um, whatever, wherever our conversation wants to go.
mm,
Yeah. And I want to follow any spark of aliveness that emerges as we talk, because for me, when I'm able to let go of any need for a conversation to go anywhere and just really be exploratory and follow whatever sparks of aliveness are there, that leads to my favorite conversations. Yeah. So I'll also leave space right now. Do you have any intention you want to speak aloud for our conversation?
mm, mhm. Yeah, my intention is to show up in vulnerability and honesty and to bring as much truth and presence to my life experience and the experience of being a woman and share that with as much aliveness as it, the space allows or my body allows in this moment.
Great. Thank you for speaking that aloud. Okay. So with my first question here, it's a bit broad and vague on purpose because
Mhm.
I'd love for the conversation to start by really you tapping into whatever's alive for you in the question, whether wide or narrow, long or short the response is. So I think that would be a good start for us. Yeah. So the question is, Linda, what is the story of womanhood in your life?
Mm. Ah. Hmm. Yeah, the first word that comes to mind is unveiling, rediscovering, allowing to express. Um, Guess my story is very much one of starting from a very stuck place, a very hurt in many ways and protected and hidden place. Lots of beliefs and patterns around not being allowed to be in my full expression, not being allowed to be in my vulnerable and needy sides. Um, Lots of internalized narratives around what is it to be a woman in this time in the context of human history and what's the role of a woman and yeah, having learned to hide away a lot of the underlying truth and desires of my heart in exchange for approval from society and from myself. Um, and the journey of slowly but surely uncovering all of these layers and finding what's under all of that stories and patterns and trauma and conditioning, and stepping more and more into the beauty of the, I don't know, the full innocent woman's heart.
Hmm. Yeah, unveiling is such a beautiful, like evocative word there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have a story or an example of an earlier time in your life where one of the first unveilings you were able to embody and experience what that experience was like for you?
Yeah, that brings up sadness.
Hmm.
For me, it has been a relatively recent process. I I like very strongly fully embarked into the academic world, the being a woman in science narrative, and it feels like that was very much a more veiling process, like a process of more and more understanding the places where, I don't know, the more expressive and spontaneous and maybe chaotic sides of me felt not so welcome in the environment where I was really trying to succeed. And yeah, like all of the older memories are kind of this struggle. It's like, oh, okay, like this part of me is also not welcome here. How do I work around it? How do I fit even better into the more masculine, the more like achieving world?
Hmm.
Um, yeah, the first maybe moment of expressions are pretty recent for me, maybe a year and a half ago. I had many attempts at figuring out my mental health, figuring out what is it that's making my life so difficult, why am I struggling so much? And a big turning point was meeting a healer, a coach that was specialized in masculine feminine dynamics, and getting to experience for the first time really a trustworthy masculine presence, and to connect with, oh, like I can just really share my heart. I can just really share my desire in the form that it comes, and I don't have to like merge it and meld it and like make it so that it can be heard. I think I always had like a pretty strong commitment to truth in my relating, but it often came across in a more controlling way. Like I want to share it, and I'm going to try to share it in the way that can fit, in the way that can be received, and realizing lately how that's a form of protection of myself and doesn't really make space for my heart to be as expressive as it would,
Hmm.
because I'm limiting how much I think it can be received, and also for the other person to fully take responsibility for what they do with this vulnerable expression. Um, so yeah, a concrete example would be, I don't know, there were many moments of like, yeah, just stepping into like saying the vulnerable thing, saying, I'm feeling insecure in this moment
Hmm.
because I need love, I need reassurance, and just saying that, and just discovering that that's enough. That like I don't need to like make this whole story around it and like try to bring the actions that would make me feel reassured. I can just like share, hey, I'm needing reassurance right now. And this step of like having a bit the humility and the courage to be like, yeah, that's where you can hurt me. That's where I can be hurt in general, and that's okay. I'm offering this as a gift. Um, Having both sides, having the side of like seeing that received and welcomed and reassured, or receiving a no, like this is your work in this moment, and that's okay. Not necessarily phrased in this way, but just seeing where the other person can't meet me and dealing with the feelings that come with that, which is to me a very alive theme around womanhood. It's like there is the ability to be vulnerable, and there is feeling all the range of responses to this vulnerability and using that as a compass to find the people with whom I can be fully vulnerable, as opposed to starting to be less vulnerable with everyone,
Hmm.
which has been the strategy for a long time.
Hmm. Hmm. Thank you for that explanation. Um, you mentioned a man who felt trustworthy. Could you elaborate on what qualities about him gave you those feelings of trustworthiness?
I think the main one in this context was the very clear feeling in me that I couldn't really affect him with my feelings. That
Hmm.
like it was okay to be mad, it was okay to be sad. That me being sad wouldn't change how he relates to the world. That like he is stable in his experience and willing to love me through the relating without being thrown around by
Hmm.
what's happening inside me. And there is some like I don't know if confusion, surprise maybe that this is really the trait that makes the interaction trustworthy. It's like if I were to just think about it and like picture it in my mind, it would be more like someone who is loving and caring and like really attunes to my experience and is really present with it. But that by itself is really not enough. The like stableness and groundedness in his own experience was really the thing that allowed me to truly let go of trying to control. There was this sense of like, I actually can't control with my feelings, which is the strategy that women most commonly use to
Hmm.
get their needs met. And yeah, that generating a surprising amount of trust. It's like, oh yeah, I can just show up as I am. And yeah, part of it is control, like trying to avoid my sad, bad feelings. And part is also like empathy, like, oh, I don't want to hurt you. And it's like, well, you can't hurt me like that. Like, you can hurt me in other ways with your behavior, but like, you're not going to hurt me by being sad at what I did or being mad at me for holding a boundary or like giving you loving but strong direction and the safety that comes with that. There is really a sense of like, oh, okay, like I can just relax and really try to find the truth under like a, a big part of the woman experience. I'm maybe struggling with, just enjoying, but understanding still how to relate to is when am I controlling? Like when are my emotions really truthful to my heart and where are they coming more from a different place? And which one can I trust? Especially in the context of trauma, where
Hmm.
like someone who is not as attuned to their truth and their center can easily get swayed by my emotional trauma response. And then we both start like spiraling together in a direction of increased charge and disconnection. But when I can trust the other to have their own center, then I can really use that almost to find my own truth in this big cloud of huge emotions that go all the way.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Wow. Yeah. It sounds like groundedness, maybe presence, non-reactivity
Mm.
were key there in establishing trustworthiness.
Mhm.
I'm wondering, have you ever been able, hmm, how to phrase this? I'm wondering if you've experienced the other side of that dynamic where you've been the grounded,
Mhm.
non-reactive one to help be trustworthy in someone else's eyes and relating to them. Have you been on the other
Mhm.
flip side of that dynamic before?
Yeah, um, that brings up kind of two sides of it. One is I've always been perceived as pretty grounded by people. I think I have quite some kind of access to my like deep trust and faith that everyone is good and like really doing their best at their core. And I think I can access that pretty easily even when I'm in a reactive state. But I think I've been doing that from a somewhat disconnected place still most of my life. Um, and seeing that that does create some space for connection, but then there is a cap on how connected you can be through that. So experiencing people kind of trusting me and emoting at me, and me being able to like hold it together, but not really kind of getting to the other end of the conflict, or the charge that was being brought up in that interaction. And as I am increasingly able to kind of both stay with the full beauty that everyone has in their own experience and like recognizing really the other on the other side, and also being with myself, like feeling my own experience in the process without projecting it and without kind of letting it explode, but just like being present with it. The more I see that it's possible to really kind of go through for the other person too. Like the other person is more able to see through their projection, see through the charge that's coming up in the interaction and work through it. And a place where that's coming up increasingly often is with women and with um, owning my desire to fully embody my feminine submissive aspect of myself and owning the need for a dominant man and really using these specific words, it triggers a lot of people. And it's very beautiful to be able to be present with that without taking on the charge that comes with it. Having worked through a lot of my shame around it and seeing like how a lot of women get so angry at even just saying these words and being able to be curious and present with their anger and allowing like under this anger so far all the times there was some deep desire for similar things, some deep like not wanting to allow oneself to feel the same desire because it's bad, because it's it's allowing the patriarchy is like a betrayal of the feminism movement, a betrayal of the feminine power, and yeah, kind of coming on the other side of really feeling the deep need for a man that a lot of, I mean, I would claim all women have, but also controversial.
Hmm.
And yeah, as one is able to be present with that without taking on the projection and being willing to take the heat in that moment, knowing that it's not personal, it's possible to kind of get through and find love and connection again and let the projections fall.
Hmm. Yeah, I would love to know more about that dynamic, both within yourself of um, proclivity, sounds like towards submission and wanting a dominant man, as well as
Mhm.
sharing and holding that space with other women and their anger. And I also want to bring in a tweet you wrote recently that feels relevant here just to add to that melting pot of this part of the conversation. So on April 16th, 2024, you tweeted, got to hold a woman today and connecting with her need for men and the shame around it. Being told I trigger her with my ease and okayness with feeling and showing my own need for men. One of my favorite
Mhm.
compliments I received lately. Hmm. So yeah, I think first I want to know more about, I mean, you already elaborated on it a bit, but that experience of like a sounds like a journey you can go through sometimes with women where a whole emotional arc of
Mhm.
like their anger melding with your ease. Yeah, is there anything more you want to like say about those experiences with other women?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I'm noticing like my fear.
Hmm.
Like, yeah, my heart is starting to accelerate, and it's still a charged topic. It's still something that I feel a lot of fear around fully owning and showing myself in. Mm. I've been like attracted to this like power dynamics experience for all of my life. And with the discovery of the kind of more spiritual approach to the power dynamic and the relationship between the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine, and specific schools of thought around polarity and how these two energies interact and truly are able to exalt each other in this hierarchy, in this like chosen hierarchy.
Hmm.
Um, that has given me a lot of like ease and, I don't know, ability to unshame my desires. Um, a lot of the kind of current narrative, it goes really against this. It's really like, oh, women have been so submissive for so long, and look what happened. Look at the patriarchy. Women really need to like take the matter in their own hands, and the girl boss experience, the woman who like can take it all and like knows what's happening and is like directed and structured and is earning the money and like does it all by herself.
Hmm.
It's really alive, and like I've really been that woman, and I've experienced just how, yeah, unhappy and unfulfilled and lost and terrified I felt in that place. And yeah, it has been a big journey of like even allowing the space to let go of a bit of that image and idea and surrender a bit more into the, I don't know, really felt sense and embodied experience of just relaxing and trusting that someone can take care of me, and understanding more the dynamic between like leading and following, and how like symbiotic and mutually beneficial that really can feel when both people are committed, and the power in being a follower that like I think a lot of like I personally have been really terrified of, well, if I'm submissive, then I am just giving up my power and I'm just allowing the world to step all over me. And yeah, there's like shame and victimhood and like cowardice maybe in wanting to take this role. And starting to step into it more from the perspective of, no, there is actually a lot of power in following. Like as a follower, you get to decide who to follow and how much to follow them. And that creates this different form of power where the power is not anymore like I go and like make the things happen, make my desire manifest in the world. And it's more receiving and allowing, like, these are my desires. I'm sharing them with the world, and I get to experience the world, creating them for me in a way even better than what I could have thought or conceived or made happen by myself. And it has this other side too of like the submission part really comes in trusting the leadership and following the leadership. Like once you commit to the leadership of a man, then there is this like following it through and trusting it even when, you might have feelings about it. I might have feelings about it. And using the feelings as a feedback loop as opposed to a weaponized way to make the man wrong or the leader wrong in this dynamic. Um, to me personally, like I feel them extremely connected with the like physical biological gender experience. Um, I don't know, I see the arguments for we all have both polarities in ourselves and we get to use them and have them interact harmoniously within us. But then at the level of relational exchange and like relational interaction in the outside world, I within myself am noticing more and more that when I'm in my masculine, I am hiding something. I am there is some like unclean manipulative experience. And the more I can just like be in my feminine, being my feeling and desires and needs, the more clean the interaction is and the more connection and love and ease flows. And it's not necessarily easy all the time. Like, of course, it brings up a lot of unprocessed stuff for everyone. Um, but yeah, as I'm willing to hold my side of the polarity, I also see the world react to that as opposed to kind of having to step into my masculine and having to make it happen. So yeah, these are some words on the topic. And yeah,
Mm.
as it relates to other women, it's like kind of the same themes come up. Like there is this terror around trusting men. There's like really this deep held belief that men don't care, that men are like selfish and only want to accumulate power and whatever and domineer and really like control what's happening in a very direct way. And that almost anything that comes from men cannot be trusted. Like a lot of women have these more or less hidden beliefs around the interaction. And a lot of it is like really justified by many generations of trauma, in my view, not necessarily kind of personally brought up by men, but more by, the collective currents of various attempts to control people in different ways. And it's a big step for women to even consider that men actually care. And what would that mean in like all the way they had related to life? And like, I mean, this comes up in, I think, all of trauma work. It's like, oh, if I was wrong about this belief, that means that all of the interactions that I interpreted in this specific frame and this specific lens could have been so different. And yeah, all the grief of the missed connection and love that was there just couldn't be seen in that moment. And I think for a lot of women is also all the grief of the places where the men didn't show up, didn't raise up to serve the vulnerable expression of the feminine and the pain that that brought to the collective experience. And it's a lot of pain and anger to be felt that it takes a strong container to be able to feel. And a lot of women are kind of alone in this struggle, and it's really hard to do it alone. Lots of feelings present.
Yeah, yeah, I'm really hap happy and grateful to have heard all that. Yeah, it feels to me like it can be naive, maybe, for people to assume that in a connection where someone's like more dominant, someone's more submissive, or someone's leading and someone else is following, that the leader is powerful and the follower is powerless. Like, no, the more submissive person, there's power in them saying and them choosing yes or choosing no. That sort of call and response where there's equal co-creation of the dynamic between someone putting something out there and the other person responding to it. Yeah. Hmm. Um, hmm. I'm
Yeah,
wondering,
yeah. I
yeah,
think
please.
you could bring
Yeah,
on.
please
Yeah.
do.
Um, One thing that I am kind of wanting to convey in this conversation is also, I think a lot of people assume that the dynamic is like kind of what has to happen, and
Mm,
it's like out of survival. It's like
mm,
a lot of women almost don't believe that they can do it by themselves, and they need this like masculine guidance, and a lot of men like want to assert their will for healing their own insecurity. And like I'm really connecting with this like the best and I don't know most fulfilled and expressed form of this dynamic comes from two people that have already found within themselves like I can be okay, like I'm a sovereign being, and out of this place I can then step to choose, I can then choose to step into this dynamic, and it's a sovereign and powerful choice. It's not a choice out of survival. And I feel these themes very alive in kind of in the current society, in the current movement, where women do have, in fact, the possibility to do it all by themselves and kind of differently from how it has been for thousands of years. And I have a lot of hope that from this place, it's now possible at a societal level to really embrace the dynamic as a way to thrive all more in the way we relate to each other, as opposed to as just a way to survive and to avoid the fear and the despair.
mhm. To me, to me, that sounds like a progression from an unaware state and through the understanding and internalization of one's own sovereignty and personal power, stepping
Mm-hmm.
into an aware state where you can actively choose as opposed to passively or by default being in that state.
Mm-hmm.
It's more of an active choice once one understands himself more fully in their perspective and their own values and what's true for them, regardless of other people's reactions to it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and really the steps from like dependence to independence to interdependence. It's like the
Mm.
survival dependence to, oh, we are all sovereign beings and we get to do what we want. And we still choose to depend on each other, but from a
Mm-hmm.
place of mutual growth and not from a place of saving each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's stepping away from like, I need you, you need me. It's like we want to be with each other, grow together, share experiences together, co-evolve. Yeah. If you're willing to share, I would love to know if you've had a connection before where you were submissive or following to a man's like leadership or dominance. Hmm. What do I want to know there? The first thought is, how was that experience for you? It feels very broad, though. I think I want to know how this connection grew from, I assume you were strangers at one point, to this connection being in that dynamic as you described earlier.
Mm, mm, mm. Yeah. Yeah, it feels vulnerable to answer this question. Mm. So, I mean, I think we attract the the reciprocal of our energies. like in all relationships and all interactions, when there is like the feeling of chemistry, the feeling of like desire for each other, there is also some level of like complementary energy going on. So really all of my relationships have had some of that element built in to like more or less explicit extents. um, the last relationship I had was way more explicit in this sense and way more an exploration of like the spiritual side and like the side of like taking it out of maybe the like direct sexual interaction and more into like all of relating. Um, and that was kind of the part that really made a difference in bringing up all of my feelings around, yeah, like wanting to step more into this part of the dynamic and my wounds around it, the places where I've been hurt in the past by showing up that way. And all of these places were kind of hidden and source of conflict in previous relationships for, I think, a disowning of our own needs on both sides and, wounds on the other side too, like wounds for the masculine of like not feeling able to show up in that way, not trusting their own leadership, not trusting their own response to the situation, to the chaotic feelings of the feminine. Um, so yeah, up until kind of this last relationship, the feeling was like, I want this and I'm afraid of it. And I don't feel necessarily the other person wanting it in the same way. There is fear of desires on both sides. And this last relationship that ended, but it really allowed me to explore more, like stepping into, oh, okay, like what would it be like to inhabit more this dynamic? And yeah, the feeling was like a lot of the time just like so much more access to ecstasy to some extent, like full trust and pleasure and like the beauty of really surrendering and really being like, yes, like I am, I'm like fully blind and I'm just following and everything that happens feels so good and I love it. And the places where I'm terrified of doing that, like this feels really scary. And the places where that brings up, oh, I am so angry at my dad, just as a god, the masculine in general, for the ways I've been dropped in the past and for the ways um, I've been the interaction towards a place that didn't feel good in the end. Um, so yeah, really this interplay between like, oh, this is how I want to feel, really, and oh my God, I'm terrified and like all of my stuff is coming up and I'm, yeah, exploding or like imploding or like overwhelmed and like everything is up and like, um, I am, the place where I'm still like really working with is anger, where I step really easily into my grief and like can feel the full extent of the sadness and like love it to some extent too, like really feel the love and the beauty of having my heart broken open. Um, but there's this other part of like self-worth and anger. They feel very related. That's still, yeah, a place of truly terror for me, of really
Hmm.
stepping into that power of like, this is where my no is, and I deserve to have that, and I deserve for my boundaries to be respected, and not out of control, but out of just like I'm a sovereign, powerful being, and yeah, I matter, and what I'm feeling matters, and so much of that has been shattered by my interactions with my family, God, other lives, whatever at whatever level we want to see that. That has been a kind of constant work of coming up against that place, feeling the way I'm feeling, yeah, feeling the worthlessness that I was trying to avoid, feeling the beginning of the anger under that of like, what the hell? How is it possible that this is happening to me? And yeah, still being very scared to fully step into that. Um, yeah, that's where
Mm-hmm.
I'm at.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like kind of the two polarities of submission. One is like following, and the other one is like fully knowing into yourself when you're not willing to follow and owning that and standing by it and being like, I'd rather leave than follow you through this. And that's where I'm at. Yeah, that's the polarity where I struggle.
Mm-hmm. Mm. I want to explore that thread of anger you mentioned more.
Mm-hmm,
And I want to bring another facet of it, which I'd seen from a webpage you have titled Who is Linda?
mm-hmm,
Under other projects and themes. I'm going to read one bullet point there. Plant medicine. I have a lot of
mm-hmm,
gratitude for the few plant medicine experiences that were key turning points in my healing journey, including something like breaking through a layer of perceiving reality beyond the semantic world, working with addictive patterns, and feeling through long held rage. Hmm. Yeah, I'd love to know more about um, the evolution, or were there any shifts in your experience of anger through plant medicine experiences?
mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so I had this, so I've been very stuck in, we can call it depression, repression, absence of aliveness, general like numbness and difficulty to feel for a long time. And I had, yeah, a few, like, being an avid reader, I read through all of the literature and like understood how people use various medicines to work through similar patterns and had a few instances of like doing acid and feeling okay for a few weeks and then kind of going back to the numbness and the stuckness. And the experience that really opened that, like to feeling okay most of the time and then having still like small periods of stuckness, but that kind of resolve more and more easily, was this MDMA ceremony where I just screamed in rage for several hours, like as if someone was killing me, like fully just screaming in rage. The neighbors came and checked if I was okay. They were about to call the police. They didn't. They understood what was happening, thankfully. Um, but the thing that was striking is that I've been trying to go there for a while. Like I had previous attempts, but they were all either alone or with friends that weren't necessarily trained or skilled at holding people. And all of these experiences were like so uncomfortable. It's like so uncomfortable. That was one big riddle for me in like the MDMA experience where I hear so many descriptions of like the beauty and the like overflowing love of MDMA. And then whenever I took it, it was always like such an uncomfortable situation, like just like really not wanting to be in my skin, not knowing what to do with it, just like please let it stop. Like this full feeling of like mistrust of everyone. It's like not, yeah, it's really really uncomfortable experience. And the way I don't know, my current model of it is that um, my system has been repressing rage for such a long time. I was terrified of letting it out in present, like in a place where it couldn't be held. And this one experience that unblocked it was being witnessed by someone who worked a lot with their own anger and was like, I don't know, something in my system really felt how it was okay to show them that level of desperation and anger and rage and just intensity.
Mm.
And finally feeling like, wow, I can let out the thing. Um, it was very like undirected anger. It was very like just exploding and like feeling. Um,
Huh.
and after that experience, like integration and more going to that place again from a place of like not just letting it explode and like relieving the nervous system, but also like moving it and directing it and channeling it into, the creation of something. Like in the end, I see anger as the energy that like makes the world change. Like once you're able to not direct it at a person, but direct it towards how do I change my reality? How do I change the system in a way that supports me not having this experience again? Then it's possible to, move through it and again reconnect to love and yeah, just make a world that's more supportive of everyone. Um, but yeah, I'm still extremely terrified of feeling my anger, especially sober. And yeah, I've been working a lot with parts work on that, like the various protectors that are still so scared of being seen as powerful, um, being
Mm.
seen as someone who can hold their boundaries. Because yeah, it has been like I have very few memories of my childhood. Um, my like actual memories of being a person start around 13 or 14. And before that is like mostly blank. And through plant medicine and through a little bit parts work, I've recovered like some sensation memories, but still like not fully formed, like, yeah, that thing happened. Um, and yeah, my understanding, my sense is like there is still so much fear of just how angry I would get if I were to actually remember that
Mhm.
the system still doesn't fully trust that it's possible to not disintegrate if I were to feel that.
Mm.
So yeah, that's where I'm at. I have a lot of mm, gratitude and trust for medicine of various kinds. And also in my journey, I'm really wanting to access similar realms just by myself, like, from a sober place and where it's possible to access it all the time. And I don't have this like reliance on the peak experience or, the chemical change that would allow it to come out. And like, okay, how do I get there? Maybe the harder way, but the more stable, reliable way.
Mm. Mm. Basically, every trip report I've heard or read about taking MDMA is one of like joyous, infinite bliss, love. So it's really fascinating to hear that you interface with it through screaming and rage and
Yeah.
but it sounds like it was exactly what you needed. So I'm
Mm.
glad you're able to access that in those moments.
Yeah. And there's still like a part of me still longs for having that experience. There's this sense of like alienation and like for years I was like trying to find the people that didn't have a good time on MDMA. And like the first hint of that was I think there is a documentary on MDMA used for PTSD treatment in war situations. And that was the first time that I saw, oh, like there's other people that have a similar experience. And also like these kinds of people, whoa, what does that mean about me? And
Mm.
just like kind of this realization. And now I have more understanding of the whole thing. And still like I would love to have that MDMA experience. And it still doesn't feel accessible. And there is grief there,
Mm.
desire.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm not incredibly experienced or versed here, but I feel like part of the entire conceit with doing plant medicine and other journeys like that is that you don't get to control how it's going to go. So maybe your very next experience there will be exactly as you want, and maybe it's not going to be as you want it. But either way, there's a letting go and accepting whatever the experience wants to be.
Yeah, I am in a lot of that at this point.
Mm,
I've had enough like difficult trips that ended up being extremely conducive to growth. That I'm like,
mm,
yes, okay, if it has to go that way, I trust it. And I'm
mm,
also more in contact with, I have pretty strong parts around like it needs to be intense and difficult for growth to actually happen. Like choosing the hard path and understanding that that's a choice. Like it doesn't have to be like that. But as I see the world through that lens, it's more likely to go that way. So that's also something that I'm
mm,
actively engaging with the parts of me that need the struggle to feel like something happened.
mm. Mm, mm. Yeah, that sounds like it has to be earned, or you can't just freely receive,
Mm.
which also, I mean, that is like a stereotypically a feminine trait of receiving. I wonder,
Mm-hmm.
like, if there's anything more about the connection there, being unable to just
Mm-hmm.
receive the receive
Totally.
the transformation you want without struggling through it in a plant medicine journey as a facet
Mm-hmm.
of like the broader feminine trait of receiving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to me, that's connected to worth again, to
Mm,
worthlessness,
mm,
to like, I really had this pattern growing up of I need to do, I need to achieve to be loved. So there is this like, I'm gonna struggle and grind through, a math degree and then through this like AI career and then through a PhD. And that's gonna earn me the love from my parents and from everyone else and from myself. And yeah, like letting go of that as is
mm,
still being a difficult process of like, whoa, what if I always deserved love? What? Then where all this effort went? Like what was that for? And the regret around it, the sadness, the anger too. Um, yeah, like the deeply held belief of I need to do something. I like me just being me is not worthy of love, growth, connection, whatever, all the beautiful things.
mm,
The places where that is still active in me.
mm. I wonder about the origin of that story of needing to do things. Was it in your career or in academics or earlier? I just
It
wonder.
started, yeah. Yeah, I attribute it mostly to the dynamic with my mom. She, yeah, she has a very strong, like, gotta, gotta do well at things, like, gotta succeed at life. She was really like pushing the wanting to have a champion daughter in some way, like a sports champion or like a professor or like a medical doctor, like this, like achieve something. And all the places where I felt that pressure in the interaction with her and where I took that as her guidance on how to be loved by her, as opposed to her expression of how she was trying to love herself and maybe not managing. And yeah, I really internalized it as the only way for me to get love is by being the good girl, the good student, the good daughter,
Mm,
and
mm,
carrying that through for a long time. Yeah, it took many years to be like, actually, maybe this is not working. Like, maybe this is not bringing me closer to love.
mhm,
Yeah.
mhm,
And of course, it was all like encouraged by the academic world. Like, all of these patterns are self reinforcing in a way. And like, I really see it as once you have the beginning of that pattern, you also find ways to bring yourself more in a place where that's exalted. And then, yeah, academia is like a wonderful place for that pattern to fully bloom into a burnout experience.
Hmm. Are there any other stories or ways you've related or struggled to relate? This is getting so broad. I want to know about with your mom and or other women in your family,
Mm,
other stories you've received around maybe womanhood or femininity from just that close
mm,
connection, that close familial connection.
mm, mm, mm. Yeah, I don't really have a connection with other women in my family. Um, my mom emigrated from Russia when she was 20 something and kind of left all her family behind. My Russian grandma was already dead at the point, and my Italian grandma was alive but very old. Um, so yeah, I really kind of craved for an elderly, an elder woman connection all my life. So in a way, like I see that all of the stories of what what's a woman, what a woman's role is, really came from my mom, either like direct transmission or just like seeing how she relates to the world. Um, hmm, I saw in her a lot of desire to be in control of her own life and kind of hearing the stories of her family. It's like, Soviet Russia. Um, a lot of the men in Russia are really struggling with alcoholism and, you know, like I don't know the specifics of the stories, but it's probably not fun for anyone involved. And I think the Russian women, there is like a lot of having to hold it together while the men are doing their thing. And like a big element of like life is just struggle. That's also just my Russian side is very much like it's all a big struggle, gotta like survive. And yeah, really seeing that cripple out in the way my mom relates to life. It's like really not trusting anything, anyone at all, ever.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like fear of all the things that can go wrong and this necessity to like be always prepared and have like she really wanted to work all throughout her life and kind of have her own decision power through the economic power in the relationship and yeah, just like the the general absence of trust in life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a question that I'm like liking more and more, engaging with other women that had more of that
Yeah.
access to the elder generations and yeah, really connecting with my desire for a grandma,
Mm.
someone
Ah.
that could hold me like that.
Yeah, I imagine it can be nourishing or soothing for you to hear more positive or yeah, positive stories of womanhood and familial relation there.
Mhm.
Ah. Hmm. I want to go back to earlier around when we were talking about anger. I think you had mentioned fears around being powerful or being seen as powerful, as well as fears
Mhm.
around expressing boundaries.
Mhm.
Hmm. Yeah, I think I'd love to know more about that. Like, what is scary about being
Mhm.
powerful and expressing boundaries?
Mhm. Yeah. Mm. I mean, I think a big part is really fear of responsibility. It's like when I'm identifying with the victim, with like the one that has been wronged against her power, it's easier to be like, and I couldn't do anything about it, and it's not my fault. And yeah, there is a way in which it's easier to go through life like that. Um, Big fear of like, oh, I can actually hurt myself. Like the decisions I take directly affect me, and I am, yeah, like responsible for the things that hurt me or not hurt me or, you know, nourish me. Um, there is a lot of fear of being seen in general, just like some, again, kind of going back to worthlessness, core beliefs of like, my true self is unlovable. If someone was to see the like ugly, messy, really angry side, they would leave me. Um, Most likely also connected to, yeah, like relationship to my mom and my dad, the way they handle their own anger. Mhm. There is a lot of fear of um, being made wrong for expressing boundaries. Like almost it's not okay to have boundaries. You gotta just like say yes and obey, and that's how it is. And if you're hurting, well, too bad. Like we all hurt. That's just part of life. um, I've recently, like in the last 2 years, started expressing more of my boundaries with my parents, and that has been, yeah, a whole journey, still ongoing journey, where the way they react to it now, I'm like, yeah, of course they couldn't handle it when I was a child either. Like
Mm.
it's all about them. Like they're really like, oh, you're saying this to make me wrong. Like you're just attacking me, and kind of inability to see past the defense of like, no, I'm just having my experience and letting you know how it's affecting me, not trying to make it your fault. And I'm still also working on actually not making it their fault. Many parts of me are still really blaming them for all that happened.
Mm. And that's another victim story, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
They
yeah.
parents.
Same story.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Um, there is a lot of like fear of physical violence if I express boundaries. It's like I wasn't hit as a kid almost ever, but I think the few like instances of almost physical violence really terrified me enough to be like just so afraid of expressing a no or expressing any form of like violent energy of like strong no, especially with men. And yeah, that has brought me to some uncomfortable situations in life. Yeah, that's also a place where I've been working on reclaiming my sovereignty and my right to be like, yeah, no, actually, I don't want that. And that's okay. And seeing the reaction is one of connection and not one of revenge or distance, which are, yeah, the two things that I fear.
Mm. Yeah, it sounds like the vulnerability in daring to challenge those internal narratives to face the fear has been beneficial for you.
Mhm.
Hmm. I want to shift to there's another tweet I saw that grabbed my interest. I'm going to read it. On April 23rd, 2024, you tweeted, "Parts of me are terrified of my dark feminine and her hunger for more." um, I'd love to know more about your dark feminine.
Mm. Yeah, that's a relatively new place to explore consciously. Um, of course, it's always there, but starting to feel it and be willing to be with it is yeah a new scary experience. Um, I've always been like I don't know had the narrative that um, like I don't want that much. I'm really easy to like be with. Um, like I'll just be content with like this little bit, and I'm not the girl that like goes after the hot guy or like the guy who is in some committed relationship with someone. It's just like this really like blank, like I cannot at all understand how someone could do that. Um, and I don't know, like feeling good about that, feeling like, oh no, I'm morally better than like I'm over that sort of dynamic. And the more I do this work of like allowing myself to really feel all the things, the more it's more like yeah, it's becoming clearer to me that no, like all of those feelings are there. I just refuse to look at them. And then, they come up in other ways and women struggle to trust me because I don't see that these parts of me exist and I'm not willing to own them. So women are kind of scared of that. I've been explicitly told by not numerous, but like more women as I started to share and kind of engage in this conversation with women. Um, yeah, there's something very scary in that, like hunger for more that I tend to project on others very easily. It's like, oh, I'm scared of you for wanting like all the money. Um, this comes up in like the coaching world and like seeing some of the kind of more abundance and like manifestation coaches like really working for wealth and my judgments of like, oh, but that's bad. That's not actually in service. Like if you were in service, then you would want just enough and then you would be okay with that. You're bad. And yeah, the work of like owning that back and being like, oh, I'm scared of my own desire for just more. I'm scared that I will forget, that other have needs, that I don't get to whatever accumulate all the things, experience all the pleasure. Um, but yeah, the desire is there. Like there is when I really feel into it, it's just like cannot be satisfied by anything. It's really just like never ending hunger for more good, more. It's really like
Hmm. Hmm.
mm. And also connecting with the way for it to not take over is by feeling it and being with it as opposed to trying to shove it down and push it away and not look at it, which is counterintuitive in many ways, but seems to be the case for most emotions, almost drives. It's like
Hmm.
you neutralize it by allowing it to exist and not shaming it and just, celebrating in the way it can be celebrated and, allowing it to play sometimes, but not to control all of life.
Hmm. To me, that speaks to a form of self-love where if I can even accept and embrace the darkest parts of myself that maybe I would prefer to be somewhat different in some cases, but they are
Mm.
there inside me. If they can be welcomed just as much as the lighter parts, I can like more fully accept and love myself for the whole broad, complex ecosystem that I am.
Mm.
Ah, hmm. I'm wondering if you have an example of a time where your dark feminine was more emergent and expressed, and maybe with someone else or some other people, and it was really well received, or it was a positive experience, or I know there's like that infinite craving for more and more and more, but overall, it was a good experience. If you have an example.
Mhm. Yeah. Mm. What comes to mind is, yeah, like in the context of sex, kind of being with this man where, yeah, the experience was like bringing me to newer and newer places of like wanting even more and just like being like, oh my God, I couldn't possibly want more than where I am now. And then being like, oh, actually, and then, oh, actually, and then, oh, actually, and then being being fully like lost, like really, so in the moment and so in the wanting, like really embodying it and like feeling it so deeply that, there is even like mm, losing track of like what my body can actually take. And then this person being like, okay, now it's enough. And celebrating that, like receiving, like feeling received in like, I love that you want more. And I don't feel diminished by that. I feel more loved by you wanting more. I know that
Mm,
it means that I'm doing a good job. Like I would be, there's the opposite, like kind of he was pointing me at if you were satisfied, you were like, no, actually enough. I would be feeling like, oh, something is off. Like that's an indication that you're not actually fully in the trusting experience. And like, I don't know where it's coming from, but like there's something in the dynamic that's not working. And the full expression of the dynamic is like, yeah, really connecting with the more and more and more. Because when something is good and it keeps coming, then it just makes sense that you want more. And I love that. And I was like, okay, yeah, I can be with that.
yeah, makes sense. Mm,
Mhm. As opposed to maybe like in other situations experiencing this like wanting more as being like bringing up the insecurity of the other person. It's like, oh, if you want more, I haven't done enough. And it's like, no, it's actually the opposite almost, as weird as that might be to engage with. For me it was. It's like, oh wow, that makes sense. I never thought about it that way.
mhm. I want to know a little bit more about a specific facet of what you just shared, which is that shift or expansion from you feeling like, oh, this is enough to like, no, actually more. Um, that story where you think initially that lower amount was enough. I want to know where that comes from. Is it, if you can put words to it and are willing to share, is it mental? Is it embodied? Is it around like a story of how like the rhythm of sex should go? Where does that? Yeah.
It didn't necessarily feel like, oh, this is enough, and then discovering I want more. It
Oh.
felt more like I want more, and then like a bigger space of wanting even more. It's like I didn't even know it was possible to crave this much, or like
Mm.
to desire this much, or to like. It's really like this wanting, this like I don't know how to describe the energy. It's a really like feel me energy, like yeah, yeah, get it. Like I want is really like come here. It's like magnetizing and like wanting to receive.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, just feeling like layers of like I couldn't possibly want anything more than what I'm like desperately wanting right now. And then like,
Mhm.
no, actually I can. I can be like even more desperate for it. And then, more and more and more and just like making even more space for the full power and intensity of the desire.
Mhm.
It was
Uh,
very embodied as experience. I don't think you can really think it
yeah.
much.
Mhm. So it sounds like an expansion of what's possible. That was
Yeah, an
what.
expansion of capacity to feel the desire, the craving.
Mhm. Okay. Thank you for sharing that.
I love the question.
Yeah, I want to bring in another bullet point in your Who is Linda document. This is, I'm just going to read it all in full. Polarity, power dynamics, and the interplay between masculine and feminine. I've been fascinated by the BDSM world forever, and over the years, got to get closer to that world, mostly experimenting with partners and getting involved with the Shibari community. While it started as a sexual interest, over the last 2 years it became clearer there's a deeper layer to it that was driving my interest. And it relates to the emotional, energetic, and spiritual dynamics within the masculine/feminine polarities. As someone who spent most of life in heavily male-dominated environments, I realized I have a lot of feelings around my femininity, and I'm very much on a journey of re-embracing and celebrating it. Hmm. Yeah, I'd love to know about that process for you of the shift or expansion from this interest in polarities from that more um, it sounds like sexual/embodied facets in BDSM and Shibari from the broader the broader expansion of that interest.
Mm.
How did that shift happen for you?
Mm. Um, I think the first kind of concrete thing was stumbling upon The Way of the Superior Man, the book by David Data. Um, yeah, he was like, yeah, I've been really fascinated by BDSM for a long time and I really like reading. So I've also gone through some of the like philosophy around BDSM. Um, there is two really good books, the new bottoming book and the new topping book, that are both books on like how does one bottom and how does one top within the sexual context, but also like as you read it, you're like, well, okay, these things, can apply to a lot of energetics in life. And I think it was through that I got to The Way of the Superior Man. And Data is extremely spiritual in the way he talks about it. And to me, it just opened this world of like, oh, okay, like this is a much deeper energetic process in a way than just the surface level, like movements that we're doing or like what's hot in this moment. Um, that there were two other pieces to this journey. One was attending ISTA, it's like retreat, um, where for the first time I was exposed to the idea of sacred sexuality and of the pervasiveness of sexual energy, like the way sexual and vital energy are really related to each other, and how aliveness and sexuality also are really related to each other. That coming from like Catholic Italy, there was a lot of compartmentalization of the sexual world that has to be shamed and the rest of life, and starting to really see, oh no, like sexual energy by itself is actually this beautiful healing generative power that we can all access and we get to decide how to engage with it, but kind of ignoring it is the recipe for many of the disasters that we see in the relationship world. Um, and the other experience was reading Existential King, which is this wonderful book making the point that um, we are all in some ways engaging in BDSM with life, that the soul at the deeper level craves all of human experience. And, we put ourselves in like distressing, humiliating, difficult situations because on some level, some part of us wants to have that experience. And yeah, I was kind of very in contact with the parts of me that want pain in the BDSM context. And then I was like, oh, okay, like that actually applies to all of life. Oh, that makes like that really puts a lot of context in some of the relationships I've been in the ways I've allowed myself to stay in a relationship where I wasn't valued so that I could feel just how worthless I wanted to feel.
Mm.
And also the context of like trauma work and the feeling just kind of being stuck in my body and my body mind system trying to recreate a situation where the feeling could move and be resolved in a way. So, yeah, all of these different pieces coming together to allow me to appreciate how beautiful and variegated the human experience is and how fundamentally kinky everyone is on some level and how much joy there can be in like celebrating that once it's possible to express it in a like controlled and intentional and contained way as opposed to playing it out at the level of like life and kind of engaging in non very I mean it's mostly like consensual. I see it as consensual on the soul level, but
Mm.
not necessarily consensual in the material world. um yeah, we're all playing games with each other and we all get to choose which games we're playing and we get to act as if we're hating it. And yeah, that's a game that people can play and it's more fun to play it intentionally.
Hmm. Hmm.
Hmm. The other thing that comes to mind in this context is like really not understanding, like, yeah, as like being very strongly identified with the masculine side of myself and pretty much only relating with the world from that side, really not understanding when people would comment on my physical appearance and say things on the line of like, oh, you can get anything you want, or like, you must be like, in so many relationships where like everyone is just doing whatever you want and like serving you in whatever way. And just this general frame of like women can just get what they want and just really having no clue of what that was about until being exposed to um, masculine and feminine communication. Like there is this school of polarity. Mostly I am referring to Zach Rhodes' teachings, which really explain, in his view, like the dynamics at the level of communication of leading and following. And I got to experience, yeah, just like needing things and asking for them and receiving them as opposed to the masculine way of like trying to make it happen. And then it clicked like, oh, women can do that. That explains so many things, but really taking 26 years to have that realization.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a broad array of ways you were able to interface with uh yeah, a greater understanding of sexual energy, the polarity. That's awesome. Hmm. I'm wondering if there's anything in your life right now that you're interfacing with um on an existentially kinky level. If there's some struggle you might actually be enjoying right now in your life.
um, yeah, for sure. A big theme for me is like stuckness. The idea of like, I'm so stuck here. I'm so powerless. There is just
Mm.
nothing I can do. It's like, it's really not my fault. Like, I am figuratively or not like tied up. It's just how it is. Like, I tried to move and like nothing is happening. And I'm just stuck here. And yeah, it's it's very funny. I hate it. I love it. And yeah, I feel very much there in like, I don't know, I kind of um burned a lot of my previous life, and I am very much in a process of like letting go of everything that's not like obviously supporting me. And my story around where I'm at now is like, oh, I'm so stuck here. Like I tried all the things and I'm doing my work and nothing is still happening. And I hate it so much. And then connect with like, no, some part of me still loves it. And
Mm.
that's the part that I still need to be with more, because other parts want change and want growth and want things to change in some direction. And this part is just loving the powerlessness of the experience. Yeah, my
Mm.
powerlessness is particularly delicious to parts of me.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, I can relate to that. Hmm. I think for me too, there's some fear or resistance to being more powerful, where
Mhm,
it's like, oh, I know my current set of problems. These are familiar and
mhm,
can enjoy like the stuckness there. If I were to like resolve them and acquire a better set of problems, that'd be unfamiliar and dangerous, and who knows what would happen.
mhm.
Hmm.
There's also like a joy in resistance, like
Hmm.
a joy in like the brat experience. And like,
Hmm.
I don't want to follow your lead. Like, ugh. I know that it's like for my own good and I hate it and I'm gonna just like stay here and it's yeah, like ah.
Hmm.
Yeah, that energy is also an energy that I have played with a lot and that is still present in some kind of bigger dynamics in my life and where I wouldn't necessarily want it to be as present.
Hmm. Could you share an example of the presence of that
Mm-hmm.
dynamic where you don't want it to be there?
Mm-hmm. Um, there's two teachers I'm working with. They're both men, and like I notice a lot of the times in interaction where like they are leading me towards me feeling my feelings mostly. And on some level, I trust that, and I show up for that. And on some level, I'm like, no, I don't want to go there. I don't want to feel better. I want to be exactly where I am. And it doesn't show up exactly like this. It shows up more at like, oh my God, I can't do it. I really can't. I'm trying so hard and I can't. But it's really like, yeah, it's this covert, like, fuck you to some level. Like, nah. And of course, it's for God. It's not for these two men just happen to stand up in that place. But there is this like, God, is your fault that I'm suffering, and I'm not gonna give you the gratification of like allowing you to help me out of it. No, you don't deserve that. I'm gonna resist it and enjoy it. Yeah.
Hmm. Wow. It sounds like for some reason the word ego comes to mind, but that doesn't feel quite accurate of like just like standing up or denying or defying God. Like there's a ton of power there, even if you're in like a frame of powerlessness or I'm not gonna change or feel my
Mm-hmm.
feelings or whatever the growth action in front of you is. I don't know. There's something about like, yeah, I'm just really moved by that idea of defying God, I don't know, really strikes me.
It's really a getting back to God,
It's what?
like a revenge. It's a getting back. It's a revenge like thing.
Mm,
Like I wanted you to be there in the past, and now that you're here, fuck you. I'm not. I'm not open to that anymore.
mm, mm,
You don't deserve my love. You don't deserve my submission, my surrender.
mm,
But of course, it doesn't serve me. But yeah, nevertheless, the part enjoys it.
mm. And usually, in my experience, and others I've heard as well, like when you resist some lesson or action, it's going to keep coming back in your
Yeah,
life and often stronger until you can't ignore it.
that is the experience. Yes.
I want to, I'm going to read through a list of questions I just have in general for these conversations and see if any stand out to ask you. Is there anything you're ashamed of wanting?
Mm. Mm. Yeah, many things. Mm. The ones that feel easy to share to some extent are, yeah, around wanting to be chosen and cherished by dominant, powerful men, wanting to be fully supported in all the ways, like financially, emotionally, spiritually, by a man. Mm. Wanting children, there is the shame around that is less kind of woman specific and more like I think academia specific, where this desire has been like very clear and alive in me for forever. But it was really like weird and out of place in a lot of these environments. And yeah, was fear around owning it. Mm. Hmm. Yeah, I feel like I shared already just generally
Mm-hmm.
my desire to be submissive woman and stand in that. Yeah, like sharing
Mm-hmm.
it in this context feels like one step further of really owning it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. You mentioned that those were at the start like things that were easier to share and own. If you're
Mm.
willing, is there anything that's like, harder to admit that you're ashamed of wanting that you'd be willing to share here?
Mm. Mm. I mean, there is like the extreme versions of that, which are like, I want to marry a billionaire and the president of the world, and
Mm.
I want to be whatever served by this number of men and this number of women, and yeah, like I want to be the queen of the place, and like yeah, the the more version of the same desires. It's like I want everyone's attention all the time, and I want all of my feelings to only matter. And yeah.
Mm. How does it feel right now to have shared that?
There is more aliveness. There is like, yeah, more playfulness. Like, oh yeah, those desires are there and it's fine.
Mm. Yeah, thank you. In your view, how can men help women feel safe in their bodies?
Mm. Mm. By really connecting to their bodies.
Mm.
And like I fully trust that men can feel just as much as women, and men's bodies hold just as much wisdom. And like if something like if you're interacting with a woman and you feel that something is off, even though she's saying different things at the word level, like you can trust that and you can use that to inform the way you direct the interaction towards love again. Um, and yeah, there is like this desire for men to trust their own leadership and their own sense of what should happen, even when the women don't like it, while like still being connected with the, the well-being and the best interest of the people they're caring for.
Hmm.
Trust your leadership. That's what I would love for men to do more of.
Hmm. Do you have any practical suggestions for how men can feel into their own bodies and the messages there,
Mm.
practices there?
Mm. Um, I have a favorite book that I have been sharing with people when they ask in this context, which is Don't Let Her Lead by Zach Rodder.
It's an
It's a really
evocative
good book.
title.
He enjoys the controversial clickbait experience because the stuff he works on is very controversial and it really triggers people.
Yeah, I think I'm
Some
laughing as like
people are,
a
yeah,
ah, it's called Don't Let Her Lead.
don't let her lead. Mhm.
Wow.
And in practice, it looks like being willing to lead all the time. And yeah, like one way. I mean, the general thing is like it looks like men learn it from other men, and there is like it's not a transmission that can come from a woman. A woman can more just like inspire that change in a man by showing the need for it. Um, but yeah, men can help each other in owning and stepping into that role.
Great.
Mm.
Appreciate the suggestion.
Mm.
Are there any women from fiction who you either particularly identify with or who inspire you? And yeah, if so, who and why?
Mm. Wow, that's a tough one. I I have been really struggling, like have been really looking for and struggling to find women to look up to that are, yeah, kind of like really embodied in their feminine and in their submission. Um, it's not fictional, but there is one woman that I currently look up to. She's called Gillian Poitier. She's a also femininity coach. Um, she's like the one example in the wild that I found inspiring in that way. Um, Fiction, not so much. It's really like there is a lot the archetype of like the fully subservient woman or the archetype of like the heroine that's in charge of her destiny and doesn't need anyone. Um, yeah, I'd love to get suggestions on other fiction to engage with in this context.
Mm-hmm. Could you elaborate on what it is about? If it was Gillian or Jillian that
Gillian, yeah, Gillian, I think it's
yeah,
Gillian.
she stands out among every other woman you know, it sounds like. So you say a little more about her qualities there.
Yeah. Um, she is really willing to be seen and vocal about her way of relating to men from this perspective of like the the divine submissive feminine and the divine kind of exalted masculine. And she's yeah, just very expressive and vulnerable in her presence in the ways like she expresses a lot around her relationship and her own dynamic with her fiance and yeah just this willingness to show that this exists and seeing other women engage with her content and resonate and yeah,
Hmm.
use it in their lives and share about their experience. Like there is a lot of men coaches that are kind of working that direction, but it's really different to receive it from a woman.
Hmm.
And then again, it can be hard for a woman to show herself in that because it kind of comes with being a lot in your ever hard vulnerability and receiving a lot of hate on the internet. So it takes a lot of support and kind of guarding of the space to allow for that full expression in a place that's not overwhelming to the nervous system of the actual human being that's there receiving all the projections.
Hmm. Yeah, I imagine for any woman in such a visible space online, it's an
Mm-hmm.
ongoing practice to assert and hold boundaries, or just know for herself like how to take care of herself when receiving hate or unwanted attention or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's a piece there around boundaries where like the in the ideal world, the feminine doesn't have to enforce her boundaries. Like she has boundaries, but the masculine enforces boundaries for himself to not hurt her. And like when I heard this, like the first formulation of this was so triggering, like women shouldn't have boundaries. And then working through like, oh, like no, this can be like a much more deep act of love on like from the masculine when framed like that and feeling like, oh, I would love it to be like that. I would love if I never had to assert my boundaries like forcefully from my
Mm,
masculine. And I would just be able to trust that, yeah, no one wants to hurt me. Like life doesn't want to hurt me. And yeah, I would love the world to be like that.
mm. I've also heard this dynamic framed as the masculine protecting the feminine so that
Mhm.
she's, free to just express and be and yeah, wouldn't have to assert any boundaries because the masculine's holding her.
Mm.
Is there any question you'd like to hear other women answer as I have more conversations with women about their experiences of womanhood?
Mm. Mm. Yeah, I have some curiosities around like we didn't talk a lot about like the sisterhood
Mm,
relationship, like the relationship, like what wounds come up in relationship to other women and what work people do to make it through that. I think I like shortly mentioned starting to share with other women my like hidden desires for more and how it related to like that specific interaction and yeah how that brings up all of the like fierce competition between women that's much more hidden than kind of the competition between men and how
mm,
women work through that when they're trying to make it intentional and connective. Yeah.
mm. Let me write some of that down briefly.
Mhm.
Yeah. Is there anything you'd like to share about that wounds you've experienced in connection with other women?
Mm. Mm. Yeah, that's also deeply terrifying work
Mm,
that I've started to do. I had the chance to do that in relationship to like being really attracted to a man and meeting other women that were very attracted to him. And like instead of playing all of my usual strategies of like playing it cool or like just not engaging with the women, just like kind of not recognizing them or disowning my own attraction for the men, just like sharing vulnerably with the women, you know, I'm terrified of you. I'm angry at you because I I recognize your beauty, I recognize your attractiveness. I like it's really a mixture of like I love you, like I want to be you, and I hate you, I want to kill you. And just like being witnessed in that. And I think once that didn't go super well, and the other times it actually led to like deeper connection and to being like, oh yeah, I feel similar things. Oh yeah, like I also feel, jealous of your beauty and your attractiveness, and I feel just as threatened by you as you are threatened by me. And yeah, we can be in it together as opposed to acting it out in the world. And
Hmm.
yeah, yeah, it's a really funny dance. Like, and I'm pretty attracted to women too. That's the part of the setup here. Um, so yeah, this like I want to kiss you, I want to kill you. They're happening together.
Hmm.
How does one deal with all of these emotions? I don't know. Yeah, and oh yeah, all of the shame around attraction to women. It's also this other bubble of things.
Hmm. Yeah, it sounds like there's um, power and freedom in being vulnerable in that circumstance with another woman. Just bringing to the surface what is true within yourself about the dynamic of mutual attraction to a man there.
Mhm. And also like allowing the space for true sovereignty. Like, oh, I'm not trying to manipulate the outcome. Like, I don't want him to be with me because that's the thing I want. Like, I want everyone to be with who they choose to be with. And, at the deeper level, then there is the parts, and that's the work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, being aware of every level of that dynamic internally and integrating them all, not suppressing or forbidding any feelings that are there. Hmm. Because you mentioned it, I'd like to give space. Is there anything you'd like to say or share or elaborate on around your attraction to women?
Mm. 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 Yeah, that's still a place that like I know there is work to do there, and I haven't really engaged with it that much. Um, there is a lot of attraction, and there is a lot of shame, and there is a lot of like narratives around the priority of wanting a family, wanting children, and kind of feeling a lot of my focus more in like how do I work out all of my attachment stuff so that I can finally date a man and we can actually flourish together as opposed to destroying each other. And like
Mm.
liking women is this like other side thing that can happen at some point, but not so important. Which, yeah, doesn't, as I say it, I'm like, it's definitely in the way of me having deeper connection with the women around me, um, which is a long, deeply held desire that mostly didn't work out, or that didn't work out in a lot of situations because of all of the unknown desires and drives in the interaction. Yeah, work in progress,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of desire for sisterhood and yeah, support from and to women.
Mm-hmm. More broadly, is there anything else you'd like to talk about or share that
Mm.
maybe we hadn't gotten to talk about today?
Mm. Mm. I'm feeling quite complete. I yeah, I really feel like we touched on many of the themes that are kind of dearest and more alive for me at the moment. I have a lot of passion at this point and desire around being seen in this journey that I'm doing and kind of hope for how it can help others in finding their journey through similar themes and like a vision for how the world could look like if people were closer to their hearts, whatever that means to them. And yeah, this is one path, but there is many.
Mm.
But yeah, really holding that vision and that desire for how it could be like and doing my part.
Mm. Yeah, to me, that speaks to what you mentioned earlier about your belief that everyone is fundamentally good and doing their best. And so we keep interacting, seeing each other, seeing what we can give and receive with each other, then we can help each other grow and flourish. Okay. Yeah. I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me today, Linda. It feels really, I feel like really happy getting to like know you a lot better and grateful for how thoroughly and vulnerably you've talked about so many different facets of your experience and what it's like to be a woman for you. So thank you for talking with me today.
Yeah, truly my pleasure. And I have a lot of gratitude for the space and the initiative and your loving curiosity.
Mm.
I felt very held and welcome in all of my experience, and I savor that, and I savor the possibility to yeah also explore myself
Mm.
better. It's always a joy. Thank you, Lupi.
Mm. Thank you. All right. Have a good rest of your day. Take care.
Yeah.